question that we're going to be discussing tonight is, why is the bracha that we make every day when we take the Arba Minim, why is it Al Netilat LULAV? Lulav is one of the four of the Arba Minim. So why are we giving top billing to the Lulav? What's wrong with the Esrog? What's wrong with the Hadas and the Arava? I mean, if anything, you could argue the Esrog, based on Midrash, represents the most important kind of Jew, because it's the Jew that has both Tam and Reach. So why not make a bracha on the Esrog, Al Netilat Esrog? So that's really our question. Or, Manny, even better question. Why not make a bracha of Al Netilat Arba Minim? Okay, I'm going to give you the Gordian knot answer. And what I mean by that is that I'll give you an answer that sort of like thinks out really totally outside the box. It's on page 4. This particular shtickle Torah in source 16 by Rav Meir Fadida, who's a Svardish Rav, who must, I think, from a previous generation, quotes the Vilna Gaon on something that the Gaon writes that has nothing to do with our discussion. The Gaon tells us that the reason why when you make a bracha on an apple, you make a bori pri ha'etz and not bori pri ha'ilan, is because ilan is Talmudic Hebrew or Aramaic. I'm not sure whether ilan is Aramaic or Hebrew. Today it's Hebrew, but I'm not sure at what time it entered into the Hebrew language. Whereas eitz is biblical Hebrew, and you're supposed to use biblical Hebrew when you make a bracha. And that's the Vilna Gaon's contention. And based on that, Rav Fadida asked the following question. He says, "V'kashali tuva al dvarav." He says, "Echad masha kosav de'ilan hu lashon targum v'abracha tzricha lios b'lashon hakodesh." He says, if the word ilan is Aramaic and the bracha has to be in Hebrew, kashali imkein eich tiknu rabotenu zal hanusach bebirkat ha'ilanot shebara bo briot tovot v'ilanot tovot v'chulei kedisa b'gemara lekaman havalu lesakin b'lashon hakodesh brios tovos ve'itzim tovim v'chulei. So question number one is, we do have a precedent for using the word ilan in a bracha, for Birkas HaIlanos, which we had a shir about a few years ago about making a bracha on the blossoming trees in the month of Nisan, where there we use the word ilan and not eitzim. So that's question number one. Question number two, he asks, Va'od kashali, ma shehevi hagra lahochiach shebemishna kasuv b'lashon targum kamo esrog v'lulav shehin lashon targum. He says, the Mishnah, he says, uses Aramaic, such as esrog and lulav. Those terms are not to be found biblically. He says, Imkein hechi tiknu chazal hanusach bebirkas dalad minim al netilas lulav. Havalu letakein b'lashon hakodesh al netilat kapot timarim kelashon hakatuv b'mikra. He says, if lulav doesn't appear in the Chumash, lulav seems to be an Aramaic term, or at least a modern term that is not biblical in nature. So if so, why did Chazal say the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav? Why should they not have instituted the bracha of Al Netilas Kapot Timarim? Because that's the term that the Torah uses for a lulav. Ulekachtem lachem bayom harishon pri eitz hadar kapos timarim anaf eitz avos va'arvei nocha. That's the description of the Arba Minim. So why lulav does that appear in the bracha? He says, "V'ulay efshar liyashev b'doicha godol es akushya hashniya dechazal ratzu lichlol benusach habracha et kol hadalad minim v'lachein lo tiknu anusach al netilat kapot timarim." He says, and this is where we get to our answer, sort of the Gordian knot answer as to why we make the bracha on the lulav. He says, because the word lulav is a word that doesn't just apply to the palm branch. It applies globally to all Arba Minim. In other words, the term lulav has two applications in the Hebrew language. It can mean specifically the palm branch, one of the 4 species, or lulav in generically can represent all Daled Minim. And we find this many times in the halachic discussion. When you talk about Netilat LULAV, we really mean taking all 4 species. And he says, lulav dekol es kol adalad minim kida ashkechan b'maseches sukkah. Sometimes the Gemara in Maseches Sukkah says that as well. B'pirish Rashi divrei Amas, he says, he says the Maharam ben Chaviv writes this in the Sefer Kapos Tamarim explicitly, or E'od b'Maseches Sukkah, Pirish Rashi divrei Amas le'ein ogdin es halulav. And Rashi says that explicitly there. Umikol makom zeh doicha godol diyachlu chazal l'taken nusach al netilat dalad minim v'lo al netilat lulav shezeh lashon targum v'divrei hagrab bazet tzarchin godol u'mitzvah liyashva. So he leaves off with the tzarchin because he's not happy with that answer, because he says even if the word lulav is inclusive, so a term that's inclusive of all 4 species, but why didn't Chazal just make the bracha of al netilat dalad minim? So he leaves off with Tzarchin on the Vilna Gaon's basic rule that with brachas you use biblical terminology, which we see patently that's not the case. But as it pertains to answering our question, if the word lulav really means all dalad minim, so then that's one simple way of answering the question, right? Al netilas lulav means I'm taking all dalad minim.
So when you have the Maseches starts with lulav agozel, is it talking about any one of the 4 minim? Or is it talking specifically about lulav?
That's a good question. I mean, in many instances, such as lulav hagazel, the application of a stolen lulav would apply to a stolen hadas and a stolen arava as well. But you have to go through each sugya and sort of split it apart. But I assume that's what the Sefer Kapos Tamarim is trying to indicate, is that it's lav dafka lulav. It could be any one of the Arba Minim. Okay. Now, let's go a little bit further in this. So that's one mahalach. It's a very balabatisha answer. You can go home and sleep on it and not lose any sleep when you have this answer, because the word lulav means all dalad means. But that's not what the Gemara says. What?
Doesn't the word ilan as an Aramaic word? That seems very strange to understand the Vilna Gaon's viewpoint on that. We have alam, very similar word, which means an oak tree, right in
Alone.
the Torah.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't seem to be logical what Vilna Gaon is saying.
Okay. Ayin sham. That's all I can tell you. All right. But first of all, we got to get around the Gemara, because the Gemara itself asks this question: why do we say the bracha of al netilas lulav? And there's different ways to understand the Gemara's questions. That's really source number 1. Let's take a look at the first source. The Gemara in Maseches Sukkah Daf Lamed Zayin Omid Beis asks the question: Va'amar Rabba lulav biyamin ve'esrog bismol, that you take the lulav in your right hand and the esrog in your left hand. My taima hani tlasa mitzvos v'haichada mitzvah, because the lulav is 3 mitzvahs, because it's got tied to it the hadas and the arava. And the esrog is in your left hand, it's only 1 of the 4, and therefore it's of secondary importance, even though the esrog is arguably the most important of the 4 species, but it's 3 against 1, right? So therefore it's only natural that the one that's 3 should go in your right hand, and the one that's 1 should go in your left hand. Fine. Now, by the way, the Gemara takes it as a given that you do not bind the esrog to the other 3 minim, even though the Gemara, at least one opinion in the Gemara, says that the igud, that the binding of the 3 species is, according to one Tana, is ma'akev, is absolutely necessary. And the question is, why isn't the esrog bound together with the other 3 species? That's not an answer that we're going to get to this evening, but it's still something that we should be thinking about. We touch them together, but we don't bind the esrog together with the 3 species. One of the arguments as to why we don't do that is found in Tosfos and Sukkah in this very sugya, who says that an esrog is susceptible to water damage, because if it gets waterlogged, it'll become puzzle. And because people store the other minim in water, the hadas and the arava especially, if we make you bind the esrog to them, the esrog could get damaged. That could be one possible explanation. But let's put that on the side for now It may be connected to a beginning of an answer, but we won't go there right now. But in any event, Amar le Reb Yirmiyah le Reb Zreika, my ta'am lo mevarchinan ela al netilas lulav. So then the next question that the Gemara asks is, why do you only make the bracha on netilas lulav? The implication of the words ela al netilas lulav is, why is it only on the lulav and not on the other minim? Hoil v'gavoa mikulan. So the Gemara answers because it's taller than all of the other species. It's meaning that it's more prominent than all of the other species. It's the first thing you see when you look at a person holding a set of Arba Minim. So frek the Gemara v'lig bahei la'esrog v'livrich. I don't understand. Make the esrog more prominent. Who told you that you have to hold the esrog all the way down below, at the base of the lulav? Hold the esrog way up high, while holding the end of the lulav. You might damage the tiyonis of the lulav. I'm not sure the center leaf of the lulav if you do that on a practical level, but I'm not sure. But the Gemara says, so just lift the esrog higher and make that more prominent in its visibility. So Amrlei holu v'mino gavoa mikulin. So the Gemara says, you didn't understand my answer. I'm not telling you that the lulav has greater visibility because of the way that it's positioned. It has greater visibility because it's a longer piece of foliage. It's a longer piece of vegetation. It's a larger piece of vegetation. And that's what gives it more prominence, more visibility. And some poskim simply take this, or some meforshim take this at face value. It's better to make a bracha on something that is more visible, that is more palpable, that is more realizable as the cheftza shel mitzvah, as the object of the mitzvah. That's just logical, right? I've got a whole bunch of mitzvah items for me to perform. The one that has the greatest level of visibility to the outside onlooker is the one that I should identify as the article with which I'm doing the mitzvah.
I've seen Hasidim take harabos that are about 6 feet tall.
Yeah, but the Gemara says that the lulav has to protrude over the hadassim, one tefach. And the hadassim have to be higher than the arava. Yeah. So by definition, the lulav is more prominent. Now, okay. So that's the way some Meforshim simply look at it. It's just whatever has more visibility is the correct object to make the bracha. And it doesn't answer Manny's question. So Manny asked the question, what would be so bad if we said, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al Arba Minim, instead of al Netilat Arba Minim.
But then you haven't identified any of the objects. You've said...
Excellent, Simi. So Simi wants to argue because you haven't identified what the cheftza shel mitzvah is at all. You've just said there's 4 objects within this mitzvah that I'm about to perform. So there are some meforshim who argue that. They say to say al netilas arba minim without specifying is in a sense worse than specifying 1 because you've specified 0. And really it's important to specify the cheftza shel mitzvah when you're doing a mitzvah, when you're making a bracha. So that's a possibility. But let's go a little bit further. We're not going to have time to go through all of these things, but what I do want to point out is the possibility of an answer may lie with this issue of that all mitzvahs are over la'asiyasan, where when you make a bracha on a mitzvah, you have to make the bracha first. As a general rule, there are exceptions to this. You first make the bracha, and then you do the mitzvah. Okay, is everyone with me? You make the bracha of alachilas matzah, and then you eat the matzah. You make the bracha lishmoa kol shofar, and then you blow the shofar. Right? What's the famous exception to that rule? Shabbos candles for women only. We had a whole shir on that. Al netilas yadayim, where you wash first and then make the bracha because your hands are dirty. Oh, leishev basukah. Interesting. Well, that's an interest. Right. That's a good exception. I don't remember the reason for that, though. I don't remember.
There used to be a bracha on making the sukkah according to Shalom.
Right.
Tefillah by a ger.
Tefillah by a ger, because he's got become Jewish before he can make a bracha. Right. So there are exceptions, right? But the general rule is the bracha is over la'asiyatan. It has to come before you do the mitzvah. So the question is, what is the mitzvah? It's ulakachtem lachem. Take. So as soon as you pick up the Arba Minim, you've done the mitzvah. So licha'ora, you should have to make the bracha before you pick up the Daled Minim off the table. So this is a whole discussion in the Rishonim as to whether that's acceptable or not. And the Beis Yosef has this whole long discussion. The Beis Yosef says that that's not going to work because there's too much of a hefsek between the bracha and the picking up of the Arba Minim. And therefore he comes up with the conclusion that what you should probably do is pick up one of the minim and pick up the lulav first and leave the other minim on the table. And then make the bracha, and then pick up the other ones and you fulfilled the mitzvah. At least that's one solution based on a discussion in the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Mem Aleph Amid Beis and Mem Beis Amid Aleph. And it could be that the reason why Chazal were mitakein to say Al Netilat LULAV is because at the moment when you're making the bracha, at least according to one original practice, the only thing you were holding in your hand was the lulav and not the other minim. Because it could be out of a concern that the bracha should be over la'asiyatan, you have only the lulav in your hand, or the lulav and its ancillary foliage of the hadas and the arab, and you haven't yet picked up the esrog. Now what we do is we hold the esrog upside down. So if you hold the esrog upside down and it's not the normative way, it's not gederech gidei latan, it's not the way that it grows, it's not the normative way that you would hold an esrog, so you haven't really taken it yet. You haven't fulfilled the netilah of an esrog. So it could be that's the reason why you're making a bracha. When you're saying al netilas lulav, you're saying la'afuke the esrog, because I haven't taken it yet.
Why take it then?
What?
Why hold it? Why?
So that there's no hefsek. So you immediately after you've made the bracha, you turn it around and then you can shake it. I'm saying b'torat efshar. I'm not saying that I've seen this as the answer, but it could be be'efshar that might be one of the ways of understanding it. I'm not sure if it makes sense, but let's go on. Source number 4. Let's look at the Maharil. The Maharil is a very early Ashkenazi source. It's really it's the Sefer. The Maharil, the Mahari Segel, was one of the earliest Ashkenazi poskim that we're aware of. Lives in the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th century, and issues piskei halacha that are the basis of the Ramaz gloss of the Shulchan Aruch. So here's the Maharil's Minhagim, and it's written by one of his Talmidim. Omar lanu Mahari Segel, di'ikla hu pam echas l'sukas moreno harav Meir me'igra. I'm not sure if this is related to Rav Meshulam Igra, but in any event, he once went to the sukkah of our Rabbi Meir Me'igra. Uveleil shmini safek shvi holach moreno harav Meir hanizkar v'swad bebeit hachoref. And on the 8th night, which basically is the light of Shmini Atzeres, which is a sveika diyoma in Golus, so you're not sure, so what are you supposed to do? He says, Rav Meir was in the Beit HaChoref. He wasn't in the sukkah. He was in the...
Cellar.
What?
Cold cellar?
Well, I guess it's the place where you go in the winter, like a log cabin, because it's well insulated, right? Kasher od hayom noagin mishpachas Lombardia sheponen min hasukah le'el ches safik zayin u'b'shachris liyom ches chozen b'soadin b'sukkah. He says that's the minhag of the people of Lombardia. Probably had a cold climate, probably same temperature as Toronto, I would guess, that the night of Shmini Atzeres, they felt, since it's only a sveika diyoma of sitting in the sukkah and it's so cold, we might as well go into the Beit HaChoref, which you and I would call the house with the heater on, and instead of sitting in the sukkah, in a cold sukkah, the night of Shmini Atzeres. And then during the daytime, when it's maybe warmed up a little bit, they would eat in the sukkah on the day of Shmini Atzeres. Uvelel ches achar shegomer marisegel sudasu b'sukkah halach eitzel maram lebeis acharef l'sameach imo. But the Mahari Segel understood that he had a different minhag, so he ate in his sukkah the night of Shmini Atzeres and then walked over to Mahari Igra to rejoice with him on the Chag. U'maharam hayamazbir lo panim shochakos lifatoso lilmod biyeshivasa. And our Rebbe Reb Meir tried to convince the Mahari Segel that he should come and learn in his yeshiva. Upotach v'omer Mahari Segel hikshesi kasha. Amay mevarchen al netilas lulav v'hakol hamukdam b'krom mukdam lebracha ki de'isa b'zayin minim shenishtabeach behen Eretz Yisrael. So he wanted to open up with a Devar Torah, and he says, I've always had this question. Why do we make the bracha al Netilat LULAV? After all, don't we normally say that whatever item is mentioned earliest in the pasuk is really the more important item? We say that by Peiros Eretz Yisrael, right? Eretz Chita u'Sa'ora. So we know from that ordering that Chita is more important than Sa'ora. Eretz Zeit Shemen u'Dvash. We know that olives are more important than dates, right? Based on their ordering in the pasuk. So wouldn't you argue that the esrog, by virtue of the fact that it appears first in the pasuk, is more important than the lulav? Im kein hachanami levarich al ha'etrog dehu mukdam bikra dichtiv priyet sadar v'kapos tamarin v'goymer. So therefore, why don't we make a bracha on the esrog and not on the lulav? So hu mosiv la v'hu mefarek la. So Rav Meir asked this question, and he answered his own question. He said, Mishum de belulav isbe gimel minim, lefichach mezumen hu lebracha. He says, the answer is because the lulav is bound together with the other two minim. And therefore, it deserves the bracha because it's bound together with the other two, and the esrog is not. V'chi tema im kein mai parach rava v'lig bahei la'esrog v'yavarech v'alo adayin lulav chashuvim tlasaminin. He says, well, if that's the case, why then did the Gemara ask to first lift up the esrog? This is a Gemara it's on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara in Sukkah deals with the question of the bracha of over la'asiyatan. He says, why does the Gemara entertain the possibility of lifting up the esrog first and making the bracha and then picking up the lulav, if after all the lulav is the more important? Yesh lomer dahachi parch v'likbei la'esrog v'as islei trei ta'amim lahakdim chada demuktam bikra v'idach debahag b'haso hashta. He says what you can explain is what the Gemara was asking is that lift up the esrog first, and now you have two reasons why you should make the bracha on the esrog. One, because it occurs earlier in the pasuk, and two, because you lifted it up and the esrog is still on the table. V'raya dahachi das haparchan damailo kamer v'likbei lahadas olara ve'elolo parach ha'esrog elo la'achshuve mishum hagdamas hakra. I'm sorry, this is the Gemara in Daf Lamed Zayin. The Gemara had asked, why don't you lift up the esrog and rise it up to the higher level of visibility of the lulav? And the Gemara had said, so what that means is, now you have two arguments. Number one, the esrog is the same height as the lulav, the top of the lulav, and number two, it appears first in the pasuk. And that should override the lulav's importance of that it's bound together with the two other species. So Mashani Rav Zreika, whole of the mine gavo mikulam, tzomar shegidulo gavo, ve'in ba'agbas yad shum iloi v'do. And the Gemara's answer was, there's no advantage of lifting something up spatially above another, but it's rather what is longer, what is a larger piece of vegetation. Okay, so the Maharil's answer essentially is that the reason you make a bracha of al netilas lulav is because it's bound together with the hadas and the arava. And therefore that makes it more important. And the hadas and the arava apparently are ancillary because they're sort of tafel to the lulav, which is so much larger than them, and that's the reason why. And perhaps even more so, it's the second of the four items listed in the pasuk. So even though the esrog is the first, the lulav is the second, but it has the advantage of being bound together with the hadas and the arava, and that's what gives it greater importance. Okay. Now, we're not going to have time to go through all of this. There's a very nice vort from Rav Gestetner, but what I want to get to is something really cool that I saw in a sefer called Ateres Moshe from Rav Moshe Nassan Nata Lemberger, who was a posek a few generations ago, and his tshuva was transcribed by his children and grandchildren. And so you can take a look at the other stuff on your own time, because there's really a wealth of information on this topic. What I want to do is, I just want to discuss the Gemara. The Gemara in source number 9. It's a Gemara in Maseches Menachos. There's a Mishnah that talks about in Maseches Menachos that there are certain kinds of mitzvos that there are multiple components of each of these mitzvahs. And one of the example So, for example, the different components of a korban are ma'akev each other. The two components in a nazir's korban, the three components in the parah aduma, the four components of a korban toda. And then the Mishnah says, v'dalad shebelulav, the four components of the lulav, and you see the word lulav here is used generically as the Arba Minim. He says, ma'akvin zeh. They are absolutely all necessary. What does that mean they're all necessary? It means that if you only take 3 species and you don't take 4 species, have you fulfilled the mitzvah? No. You haven't really fulfilled the mitzvah. Now, let's take a look. So the Gemara now says, the Dalet Shebelulav ulakachtem lakicha tama. So the Torah says that the word ulakachtem can also be read as 2 words, ulakach tam, take completely. And therefore what is being implied by the word ulakachtem, that it has to be a complete taking of all 4. You can't get away with taking a subset of the 4. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava lo shanu ela she'ein lo daled minim delulav. So he says that's only true if you only have 3 out of the 4. Aval yesh lo ein ma'akvin. But if you have all 4 species, you can still fulfill the mitzvah even though you don't take them all together. And Rashi understands that to mean, and that seems to be the cadence and flow of the Gemara, is that if you have them all in your presence, you can take them one after the other. As long as you know that you can take them over the course of the day, all 4, you don't have to take them together. You can just, that's what's not ma'akev. It's only lechatchila that you should bind them together and take them together. But if you take them separately, as long as you have all 4, and over the course of the day you will take all 4 at some point, you can be yotzei the mitzvah. So the Gemara challenges that, and it says, Meisvei, dalad minim shebelulav, beis mehen osin peros, ubeis mehen ein osin peros, ha'osin peros yuzukukin l'she'ein osin, v'she'ein osin peros yuzukukin la'osin peros, ve'ein adam yotzei yedei chovasa b'nat shiu kulan ba'aguda achas. So the Brisa seems to contradict that. The Brisa says that there are 4 species. 2 of the species bear fruit, the other 2 do not bear fruit. But they are all dependent upon each other to the point where that you do not fulfill your obligation unless you bind them together. V'chein Yisrael b'hartza ad shikulan ba'aguda echas shene'amar haboina v'ashamayim ma'aliosav va'aguda sol eretz yisada. And the Brice's conclusion is a moral lesson about the Jewish people. There are many Jews who bear fruit, many Jews who don't bear fruit. But we all need each other. And the Geula will only come when all Jews are united together, regardless of our sense of utility to the rest of the Jewish people. We all have to be bound together. It's a beautiful message, and that's what the Brisa says. But what do we infer from the Brisa? We see that according to the Brisa, you cannot fulfill the mitzvah if they are not bound together. So how can you suggest that if they're not bound, you can still fulfill the mitzvah? So the Gemara says, Tanoi. It's actually a machlokes Tanoi. The Tanya lulav bein agud bein she'ein agud kosher, and Rabbi Yehuda omer agud kosher she'eino agud pasul. And the Brisa says that according to the Tanakama, even if it's not bound, it's kosher, but only according to Rabbi Yehuda must it be bound, the 4 species bound together in order for it to be kosher. My time into Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning? Okay, the Gemara learns it out from Psukim, and then the Gemara asks, we have a brisa that says that there's a mitzvah to bind the lulav together, but if it wasn't bound b'di'evet, it's kosher. So who does this go according to? So the Gemara says it goes according to the Chachamim, and even though you fulfill the mitzvah without binding it, there's still an aspect of Zeh Keli Ve'anvehu, this is my Lord and I will glorify him, that creates an imperative to bind it, even though that's not an intrinsic part of the mitzvah. Okay? I'm just going to close the door for a second, there's a little bit of noise. Okay. So we've seen now that, and this is sort of the background that you need for this next piece that we're going to see. Lechatchila, you should bind the Arba Minim together. But, according to the Chachamim, you can fulfill the mitzvah even if they're not bound. And we'll take it one step further. Not only if they're not bound, even if you're not holding them all at the same time. 9 o'clock in the morning, you pick up your hadas. 10 o'clock in the morning, you pick up your arava. 11 o'clock, you pick up your esrog, and at noon, you pick up your lulav. According to the Chachamim, you fulfilled the mitzvah of ulakachtem lachem. Got it?
One mitzvah or four mitzvahs?
It's one mitzvah with four components.
But there's a hefsek between each one.
Okay, there's a hefsek. Nu. So, a hefsek b'di'evit. It's not ma'akev. Maybe you're not mafsek. Maybe your machshav is on the Arba Minim the whole time. The point is that they don't have to be taken simultaneously. They can be taken sequentially, one after the other. We take a look at the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch actually codifies this. And it says in Siman Taf Reish Nun Aleph, Daled minim halalu ma'akvin ze ezeh shim chaselo echad mehem lo yivarech al hasha'ar avol notlan lezecher ba'alma. So if you don't have all 4 species, you cannot make a bracha because you cannot be yotzei the mitzvah. However, you should still take the 3 that you do have, or the 2 that you do have, just as a remembrance. Like midrabanan, it's something, right? It's not the mitzvah, but it's something to remind you of the mitzvah. Now, and the Ramah says this is true both on the first day and all subsequent days. V'imhayu arbatan mitzuyim etzlo v'notlam echad yatsa. And if you have all of the 4 species and you take them sequentially instead of simultaneously, so then you're also yotzei the mitzvah. And the Ramah says, "V'vad shiyu kulam lefanav," provided that all of them are in front of you. V'yitol halulav techila v'yivarech al halulav v'daito gam al acherim. And here's the Ramah. Here's the important line: make sure you pick up the lulav first. If you're not going to take them simultaneously, for whatever reason, you have a compelling reason to take them sequentially, the sequence should be lulav is number 1. V'imsach beineihem tzarech levarech al kol echad bifnei atzmo. What you said, if there's a hefsek between, you have to make a new bracha on each subsequent one of the 4 minim that you take. He says, and the Rashba actually has a tshuva on this. The Rashba asks the question. He says, according to us, that we say that they're not ma'akev, which means you can take them sequentially. Do you make 1 bracha, or do you make 4 brachas on each one sequentially? So he says, tshuva, is source number 11. Tshuva ein mevarech ela bracha echas al kulan, de'bar mitzvahs echas hein, de'arbatan rather mitzvah echas hein, ve'ein mevarchen al mitzvah echas al kol chelik v'chelik mimena bracha bifnei atzma. And you can only make 1 bracha on 1 mitzvah, even though there's 4 components to the mitzvah, so you still have to make only 1 bracha. Now, he then goes into a discussion of tefillin. And you know that tefillin is a whole controversy. Do you make 1 bracha? Do you make 2 brachas? It's a whole question of, is it 1 mitzvah or 2 mitzvahs? So if it's 1 mitzvah with 2 components, you only make 1 bracha, which is how Sfardim paskin. But if you hold that it's 2 mitzvahs, 2 separate mitzvahs, then you make a bracha, 1 on the shel yad and 1 on the shel rosh. We're misupak, whether it's 1 mitzvah or 2. So we say a bracha on the shel. I mean, we are machriya that it's 2 separate mitzvahs, but just to be yotzei the day that it's 1 mitzvah, we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Li'olam Va'ed after the bracha on the shel rosh. Okay. Now let's take a look at Rav Lemberger. Bedin birkas al netilas lulav. So he writes like this: B'gemara sukkah Amar le Reb Yirmiyah Reb Zreika my time alo mivarchinon ela al netilas lulav hol v'gavoa mikulan. So he first quotes the Gemara. And he says, the Gemara says the reason why you make a bracha on the lulav is because it's higher than all of them. Okay, so he says in the 4th line, he says, Yesh lomar de kavanas ha-Gemara, hine daled shitos yesh bekavanas hashas de perak ha-kometz menachos, daled minim shebe'ulalav ma'akvin ze-ezeh, Amar Rav Chia bar Rav lo shanu ela she'en lo aval yesh lo ein ma'akvin. He says there are 4 different shitas in the Rishonim as to how to understand that Gemara that we just quoted from Menachos. Hine shitas harabeinu tam hamuva b'tois v'shamu v'pirkin b'divrei hamaschol shetehei diyesh lo ein ma'akvin hainu shein tzorach la'agden yachad. That the way Tosfos understands it is that you don't have to bind them together, you don't have to tie them up together. Kerabanan de Reb Yehuda avol tzorach litol kulam b'vas achas. According to Rabbeinu Tam, you must hold them all simultaneously in order to fulfill the mitzvah. Even according to the Chachamim who say you don't need to be oged them, All that means is that you don't need to tie them together, but to hold them together, Rabbeinu Tam says you must do. Ulefi zeh shal Reb Yirmiyah my time alo mevarchinan ela al netilas lulav hayaroi shivarach al netilas arba minim kevin shekulan yachad chada mitzvahenu ma'akvin zeh zeh. Now, according to that interpretation of the Gemara in Menachos, we understand why Reb Yirmiyah was asking, why do you only make a bracha on the lulav if you're holding all of them? If you're holding all of them, according to everybody, in order to be yotzei the mitzvah, why only make a bracha on one of the four? V'alzeh mishani holav amino gavon mikulan. He says, so the Gemara answered, because it's taller, it's more prominent. So the Gemara's question makes a lot of sense. Why, just because the lulav is more prominent, lift up the esrog? He says, it comes first in the pasuk, and you can make it higher, make it more prominent visibly, and therefore it should take priority over the lulav. But he says, "Ach be'emes l'shitas harabeinu tam kasha, dema ha'echrech be'emes shivarach dafkal echas me'ad daled minim, kevin shemuchrach litlan bevas achas yivarach al netilas daled minim," like Manny's question. He said, but it really doesn't make any sense. He says, if everyone holds that you must be holding them simultaneously, why then does the Gemara not ask, make a bracha on all four, even if the lulav is the most prominent and the most visible? But why not make a bracha on all four? The gamatam shemase kolu v'mino gavon mikulam asi shaper rak imuchrach shetzarach levarer echad me'adalad izer sheyavarech az yesh lechapes tam mi mehem lahakdim v'yilanu tam ze alulav aval akati lo mituratz kushim lama ein mevarchen al kol adalad minim bichlal. He says, I leave off with Itzarachian on Rabbeinu Tam. If according to Rabbeinu Tam everyone holds you must be holding the 4 species simultaneously, I don't understand why the Gemara is satisfied that you only make a bracha on lulav, because at the end of the day you could easily say al netilas arba minim. So he says, I don't understand the answer. Aval l'shitas harambam v'rif v'shulchan aruch ein tzarach litlam b'vas achas davka li'ikuva ela yachol litlam b'zeh achar zeh. He says, but according to the other Rishonim, and this is the maskana of the Shulchan Aruch, he says you don't need to take them simultaneously. You can take them sequentially. Rak laharambam tzarch sheyeh mitzuyim etzlo ularosh v'tur v'ramah tzarch sheyeh kulam lefanav. He says there's slight nuance of difference. According to the Rambam, they just need to be in the house. They don't need to be right in front of you. According to the Tur and the Rush and the Ramah, they need to be right there in front of you on the table when you're making the bracha. So asi shapir shein levarich bracha kolelas kol adalad minim ki arei yochol lahafsik beineim b'meshech kol hayom. He says, I have a very simple answer why you only make a bracha on one. Is why you're only making a bracha on one species? Because it's possible to be yotzei the mitzvah by picking up 4 species sequentially. So it would be a sheker if you said, Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvah savet tzivanu al netilas arba minim, and you only then pick up the lulav, if you're not planning to pick up the esrog for another hour. Okay? V'kevin shekain shebishah zeh shemavarech adayin eno notel kulam yachad lachein tzarich sheyavarech rak al min echad. And therefore you must make a bracha on only one of the 4. Ve'al zeh shal Reb Yirmiyah my time ala'olam mevarchim al netilas lulav after vadei shetzarich sheyavarech rak al min echad. And that was Reb Yirmiyah's question. So I understand why you can only make a bracha on one in those instances where you're not going to be taking them simultaneously, for whatever reason. Let's say, I can come up with a scenario. What if you got a group of, what if you have 200 people in the shul, and you have one set of Arba Minim, and you want everyone to be able to hold, and you want to economize on the time. So what you could do is you create a production line, you pass down the lulav, and then you pass down the esrog, and then you pass down the hadassim, and you pass down the arabas. So you're economizing on time, because that way everyone gets a chance to, maybe that would be a svara, I don't know. But anyway, come up with your own scenario as to why a person would feel compelled to take them sequentially instead of b'vas achas. The point of the matter is, though, he says that now the Gemara really makes sense. The Gemara's premise is, aha, I see why you would only make a bracha on one of the 4. Why then is the lulav the one that is chosen? Why is that the nusach of the bracha? Kaven shein hechrach litlan bevasachas mikol mokom. Nomar shivarach al oso min shepasach bo tchila. Why then, listen, maybe you pick up the esrog first. Maybe you pick up the hadas first. Why dafka the lulav? Valzem mishani hol v'mino gavoa mikulan. And that's what the Gemara says, because it's the most visible. And therefore, the one with the greatest visibility, the greatest prominence, should be the one you pick up first. Uparach v'lig ba'hei la'esrog kanal, kevin the esrog muktam bikra kanal, valzem mishani hol v'mino v'chulei. So the Gemara asks, why not pick up the esrog? The esrog can be very prominent. Just lift it higher. Lift it high, just like you lift up a lulav high. And the Gemara says, no, it's the most prominent in its size, not just in its visibility. V'chein l'shitas haRamban de'ein tzarach af sheyeh mitzuim etzlo rak sheyeda shichol la'asigam ba'oso yom. He says the most liberal shita, even more liberal than the Rambam, is the Ramban. He says that even if you don't have the 4 species in your house, but you know that they're coming, you can make a bracha now, with as long as you only have 1 species, with the anticipation of getting the other 3 later in the day. Nearly the And he says even a bigger chiddush. Let's say all you have in your house is the esrog. You would still make a bracha of al netilas lulav in anticipation of getting the other species, because the lulav is the most prominent. And that was really Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. He says, you should make a bracha on whatever species you have available to you. That's the one that you should make the bracha on.
What if only 2 out of the 4 show up that day?
So then it turns out lemafreya that it was a bracha levatala. According to the Ramban, though, you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be getting all 4. That's the point. It could be that's the reason why the Rambam and Tosfos hold not like the Ramban, because the Ramban is too optimistic. You got to be... You got to worry, maybe the wagon's going to break down along the way. Who knows what's going to happen? But the point is that he says, listen, Chazal needed a matbeya shel bracha. They needed a consistent bracha. So therefore, they had to choose one of the 4 where hypothetically that would be the best one for you to take first. If it happens that you don't have the lulav available, and all you have is the hadas, let's say, you would still make al netilas lulav. Pick up the hadas, and then when the lulav comes, you'll pick that up as well. Optimally, not making a hefsek, right? So as not to require a separate bracha. But that's what, that would answer our question at least as to why we make a bracha of al netilas lulav.
When they talk about making a bracha for each one individually, does that mean it's the same bracha for each one individually, or they're talking about making a different matbeya?
That's a good question. It's not clear from the Shulchan, it's not clear from the Ramah. And it's also not clear, based on the Tshuvas HaRashba, that doesn't seem to be true. The Tshuvas HaRashba seems to say that you do not make a separate bracha on each component of the mitzvah. So it could be that that once you've made the bracha, could be that not everyone agrees to the Ramah. I'm not sure, we'd have to analyze that. It's a good point. Anyway, that's the end of the halachic discussion. But I wanted to... on the back side, you have a bunch of different explanations based more on drush. Really not so much drush, because they're from Shuvas farm. You have the Bnei Yischaser, Rav Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov, who writes in his Igra de Pirka that it's all based on Kabbalah, that the lulav represents the spine, which was the only part of man's body that didn't participate in the original sin of the achilas eitz hadas, and therefore it's the purest of the 4 species, and that's why you should only dafka make a bracha on the lulav.
What about the waving though itself? Like, if that's part of the mitzvah, if that is part of the mitzvah according to the Gemara, according to the Fosher, the lulav is the one that you wave. Is that a reason for the bracha?
Could be. It's an interesting point. The lulav is most prominently waved, but the truth is you're
It's hard to
waving...
wave the others.
No, you're waving the hadas and the aravas as well. I mean, you're waving them together with the lulav. So, but you're right. I mean, that could be part of the argument of why the lulav. Take a look at number 14. Rav Yitzchak Sharim or Sarim. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. He was a Rav from Syria. in a 19th century Syrian Rav. And he writes, Tam shemivorchem al netilat lulav v'lo al netilat etrog ol netilat arba minim. Katvu ha-mefarshim lefi she'ein mefurash etrog b'Torah behedja. He says that the mefarshim write because the etrog is never specified explicitly in the Torah. The Razal amru hadar ze etrog v'chein hashar avol lulav mefurash kapot temarim. He says the only one of the 4 species that is specific, that is specified, as we know unambiguously what it is the palm branch. Because there the Torah says the branches of the date. There's no ambiguity, right? Because we all know what a date is, and we know what the branches that it grows on, or the fronds that it grows on, right? Now, pre-Eitz Hadar, the fruit of the beautiful tree. What is that? Anaf Eitz Avot, the branch of thick boughs, and Arvei Nochal, and willows of a brook. Doesn't specify what species is being discussed. They're all based on Torah Shabbal Peh, on a Masorah that's passed down to us, what these branches are. The only one that is completely unambiguous is the date palm. Tam Acher, I'll give you another reason. Lefishu hu gavoa min hakol bekapot k'tiv remez shelulav echad. And he says it's because it's taller than all of the other ones. And furthermore, the Torah writes the word v'kapot without the letter vav to tell me that the lulav stands out, shelulav echad, that it's one lulav, or that the lulav is singular. Tam acher, lefi she'etrog domeh lelev, v'hahadas leinayim, v'harav lisfatayim, but lulav domeh l'shedra shu ikar haguf. Another reason. He says the estrog resembles the heart, the hadas resembles the eyes, the arava resembles the lips, but the lulav resembles the spine, which is the mainstay of the body, because that's the thing that makes man erect. Tam acher lanias daiti shahalev aloshen v'asfatayim tuluyim ze bazeh ve'ein avaliba tracer surei da'avera aval hashedra ze naskui lo neheneh me'etz hadas ve'ein osa averos. I actually quoted, I attributed to the Igor de Pirka, but it really is what he says. He says it's the only part of the body that did not participate in the original sin. V'lazeh amru razal sheshlosha asar b'nei adam nichnasim l'gan eden v'ragleihem lefi shem tluyim b'shedra shel adam arishon v'einem tzrichim misa. This is alluded to this is that the Gemara, the Medrash says that there are 13 people who entered Gan Eden with their feet. Why? Because the legs are connected to the spine, and they didn't need to be punished with death because they didn't participate in the sin. That's why we make a bracha on the lulav, because we don't want to use any other part of the body represented in this foliage so as not to make a kategor, the component that was used for sin, just like we don't use gold in the Kohen Gadol's vestments on Yom Kippur. We should not make a bracha on the other 3. Ve'al pizeh pirshu amefarshim pasuk amarti e'ele b'tamar. He says, if you take a look at the pasuk in Shir HaShirim, I said that I will climb up the tamar tree. Rashei tevot etrog arava lulav hadas. E'ele, ayin, aleph ayin lamed hey. Esrog arava lulav hadas. Okay? Amarti shetzarech levarech al kulon v'lama b'tamar levadad. But then eleh, what? No, b'tamar, only with the tamar. Why? V'hi ki meishiv ochaza b'san sinav she'ikar haguf hu ashedra v'lo shar evarim. Ochaza b'san sinav means in this context that I will take hold of the mainstay of the body, and that's the reason why we make a bracha on the tamar. That's all alluded to in the pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Amarti ele b'tamar ochaza b'san sinav. Okay. Rav Mashash, who we quoted in a previous shir a year and a half ago when we gave the Shabbos HaGadol drasha, and I talked about whether there'll be electricity in the third temple. I don't know if anyone remembers that. That was a tshuva from Rav Mashash, who discussed whether modern technology will exist in the temple. So he has a tshuva about this inyan, about why we make al netilas lulav, and he says, Shat tzadik nimshal l'tamar. He says a tzaddik is compared to a tamar, to a palm tree, as it says, tzadik katamar yifrach. And he says that's the reason why you should make a bracha on the tamar, and also because it's taller. He then says even further. He says that the lulav bears the tamar fruit, which is one of the 7 sweet fruits of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it should take priority as well. And there's, even though an esrog bears fruit, but it's not one of the 7 types of produce with which Eretz Yisrael is extolled. Okay. There's plenty more for you to see here, but I just wanted you to see that there's a variety of discussion on this subject. And now you have a little bit of a better idea as why we say al netilas lulav and not al netilas arba minim. Any questions, comments? Okay. Have some good food tomorrow. Remember, there's a mitzvah of achila. I'm just going to say one last thing for the tape. I doubt anyone will see this because it's at the end of the shiur, but there's an email or a text that's going around. It was forwarded to my wife, and I just wanted to make you aware of it. There's an email going around that is promoting this idea that if you want to get a shidduch, guaranteed shidduch for this year, you should have 7 meals with bread, wash 7 times, say Birkas Hamazon 7 times on Erev Yom Kippur, and the email ends that it's a skula that is more effective even than tefillah. And it's baduk u'menusa, it's tried and tested, very good. And when I saw this text, it's the second year that I'm seeing it, I said to my wife, there's only one problem, it's keneged halacha. It's anti-halachic, because if you know, right after you bench, you're going to be washing again. It's a bracha she'eina tzricha. There's sugyas that we talked about this in halacha, especially Erev Pesach, shechalios b'Shabbos, this whole issues that poskim talk about this whole idea. I said you're creating a bracha she'eina tzricha, so it's going keneged halacha. But I'll get a shidduch. How can you justify violating halacha Erev Yom Kippur for something selfish like that? I mean, it's not right. It's not right, and so I have to sort of make a macha on this among the chevra. And to say that it's better than tefillah, that's an outrageous kind of thing. We are not a primitive nation of superstitious people. We believe in Hashem. We believe in hashgacha pratis. We believe in siyata dishmaya. We believe that God gives to the virtuous what He wants them to have in life. And people who use superstitious talismans and omens and things like that, that's not really what it's all about, chevra.